Welcome back, everyone. The cat's got... Yes. Yes, drunk on the effects of this symposium. But I think Kat has got used to hearing my voice saying, "Welcome back, everyone." my new catchphrase. Oh, so great. We're starting the last session with my state of delirium. But thank you very much for being here and for taking part in from our perspective, this whole few days is extremely important and meaningful and brings lots of things together. And in a way, this final session, is like this sort of moment where many things come together. And we kind of anticipated that might be the case. And for that reason, we invited some people who are very close to us and who have done an extraordinary job of holding us in this project, and have asked Annie and Kat and Sue to be with us to help hold us in this moment as well. Yes, so there is the simple being in this particular moment of the project, which is wrapping up and reflecting back. There is also being at this moment of the days of workshops and symposium, where we're so full of so many things and all these things kind of churning and resonating and turning into delirium. And then also, we wanted to try to make some space for thinking a little bit into the future, and so we've sort of posed this question as a sort of title about the future and what next. I think in many ways, when we've been having conversations ahead of today, that a lot of the thinking about what next also involves a looking back that feels important, which I think we will do. And we know that it would help to hear from Sue and hear from Annie and Kat some kind of reflections on the project and their experiences of it. Sue, you have been with this project since it was an idea at the very beginning. You can say that first.
Guido wanted to say something.
Just on that. So to have a little anecdote. So I remember vividly, for those of you who saw the lecture performance yesterday, that I came to SDS to practice the pitch as well. I remember Sue there and doing the pitch, and I remember you saying like two things. I don't remember the exact words, but there was one thing about why should artists care in some more politely articulated way, and the second thing about what's your position on this. And I remember that in the sort of first draft of the proposal, I had been trying to be very scientific about it. It could be this, could be that, liveness, and I think in response to your question, I do have a position, sort of my position is that of a dad who believes that liveness is special. And I think that sort of directly led to the question, what makes live experiences special, which already implies that they are special. It's a question, but it articulates my position. So that was a really important part for me in the sort of thinking about the project. So there's those two little things. Not so little.
It seems a long while ago. And Guido also reminded me that we told each other, all of us, well, there's very little chance of us getting the money, come on, it's little. And then they rang me up, and I was on a train, and they said, "We've got it." And I just yelled out to the entire carriage, "We've got the money!" And the typical English carriage, they all went. So, of course, that's a huge moment of liveness. I felt as alive as I could be at that moment. And I want to sort of make quite sure that that word alive is very resonant with us right now. Because we've got used to going liveness. We've got, which is brilliant and wonderful. But, and maybe very particularly at this moment in time, being alive and being alive in science and dance is it's a particular place, and it should be a place of action and activity and doing. And I think that's one of the things that I have loved as I have come into every project, and I've seen people work so hard and so diligently and in a communicative way. And there have been times, and I know I've said it to very particularly Matthias, because he was more often there than Guido was, because I came to watch rehearsals. I said, this makes me proud of the studio, because this is what the studio is. And it started under my directorship, and it has continued under the directorship of Annie and Kat. And I think it thrills us, because it promotes dance thinking, dance research, because I think more and more we're thinking of ourselves as researchers as well as performers, or we are researching whenever we perform. So there is a kinship with this idea of researching ideas, researching potential of something that's just about to happen or could happen. And I think that lives within us, and I think that's one of the things that brings us together, even though there have been moments in which separation has occurred, which is fine, because in separation we might learn something about what our boundaries are, and what, not necessarily that our boundaries have to be overly fixed, but they can be very useful to us. So just to bear in mind that when I first came into the studio, people used to say to me, "Oh, it's so good you've got a home." And I went, "Pfft," because it wasn't a home I wanted. I wanted a place that had open doors and open windows, and that things should pass through here like a small storm ever so often, and help change our perspective a little bit, or animate us, or keep us alive. And very early on, I had I think it was through Scott's project that I met Patrick Haggard, and well, I'm not going to. The essence of science thinking left its molecules in this building throughout, from the very first years to now, and I think that's as it should be, and I hope very much that it will continue, because it's a discipline of the body. Of course, science is more than the human body, I realise that, but in our case, it is one of the disciplines which inform us more about how and who and what we are. And even if it's, I hope I didn't disturb people when I said we've only made up of 20 elements, and we go, "Oh, well, thanks." That's not a lot. But it's the foundation out of which all of this arrives. Every single individual in this space arrives out of these simple elements, and every single one of us is different, and every single one of us has taken a path. If I wake up at night thinking about that, going, that's extraordinary.
Thank you, Sue. Yeah, I just want to, I just want to kind of say thank you to you, because, so your influence on this project is immense. I think for me, the way that I approach this is hugely, has evolved hugely thanks to you. And of course, I don't think that we could have, I don't remember a time of having any ideas together about this project that didn't include this building. I think from the beginning, it was immediately we could only imagine it in relation to this building. And then also, of course, through the entire process of this project, you've also been with us and involved and holding us and supporting us. And like I was saying to you a moment ago, a little earlier today, I often feel like I can't see the wood for the trees, and you're always helping me do that.
I didn't do too much wood. Do you want me to do a bit more wood?
Yes.
Actually, I think I'm going to echo Seke, how incredibly important it has been in the last 5 years that 6 works, if we include 5, that's only 5. I'm going to go for 6. I made a very good work and none of you saw it. 5 works have been made, 5 works have been paid for, artists have felt secure in an insecure world, and something unusual has turned up, something unique in all of the works. And if there is something latent in that we need to hold on to as part of the discovery that Scott is talking about, then I think maybe this idea of trying to make quite sure that the context of the arrival of these works and the arrival of the scientific data is so well documented, which I know it is being, that there is a resource for returning to it, as Scott and I and Phil returned to our earlier experiences. I can't remember how many years ago. So there's a pathway that is moving through this relationship between dance and science, with this idea that our lived-in bodies are both the resource and the communication of further ideas. So there is a long track to this, rather than, however 5 years is quite long, there's a much longer track to this, which I think everybody who's come in this last week, please hold on to, and please keep asking questions about, and please keep some form of this alive in you, as inevitably life is going to, move us on. So the wood is also to see the development, and I can speak more about the artists than I can about the scientists, because I see them and love them and hear them, but I don't know enough about their development. But the development of the artistic practice in this, through all of those pieces, is astounding, because it's our capacity for alteration and change throughout the questions that are being asked and the performances which have to arrive and be truly communicative to the audience. And it's how the questions begin to become the work itself, and then the work itself is drawn forward to the audience, and the audience knows a little bit more ahead of time about what they're about to see, because they know they are part of a scientific experiment as well. So instead of the audience arriving a little bit more naked, I don't mean that, but you know what I mean. There is a sort of preparation all the way through in which all participants feel as if they have a position, a place, a responsibility, a task, an outcome, and everybody who is involved has that. And I feel that has been really worth noticing on so many levels, even, as Seke said earlier, even if eventually we don't make a work in relationship specifically to science, I don't think anybody who has undergone this is the same as they were before. That's what being an artist and a scientist is you're not the same, because en route you have discovered something else. En route you've discovered something else. I don't know.
Yeah, and now it's now I get to say thank you to Annie and to Kat. Also, totally for holding us through all of these processes, and for for discovering NeuroLive as an unexpected element of activity here at SDS when you became co-artistic directors, and for really embracing this project like so wholeheartedly. And I mean, there are so many layers which I'm sure you will talk about and we can talk about together, about how your way of holding this and the whole SDS team's way of holding this, all the activity that has happened here is so important, evident in 1,000, more than 1,000 million details. And Guido and I also wanted to ask the two of you to say a little bit about the very particular kind of perspective that you've had on these unfolding activities as the co-directors of the main partner organization of the work. And it's a very kind of unique, in a way, unusual sort of, I guess, organizational relationship, in that you've had a perspective on that, and also many different forms of involvement in the activities that we've been doing.
I don't know whether I can articulate all of that, but I think something that comes to mind as you were talking was just, as you were saying how Kat and I have been involved, and it made me think how actually Kat and I have been involved in quite different ways throughout the years, and that you've also invited us in our freelance capacities to participate in various ways. And that made me think of the word bleed, and it made me think about the word bleed between the science and the art. Made me think about bleed across time, and how in the organisation we're very interested in roles not being just concrete and defined, and there's quite a lot of bleed across the team. And a lot of the team are dancers, and they also work part-time, so they also have work that they do outside of the role, which I think is it's a juggle for us, but it's also really an incredible thing to have that variation in the team. So it was just making me think about what we're trying to do in terms of our flexible structure inside of the organisation, and how that's felt reflected in how you've been working. As I see Iris performing and then producing, and then, you know, and then Kat then producing, and then you performing, and then, you know, so, and I was just thinking how it's really important that things aren't concrete.
In terms of our perspective, I mean, so many different perspectives on all of the different things, but I wonder if I might mention a few of the things. Well, maybe it's important to say contextually that Annie and I arrived kind of almost on the day that the first symposium started, so our journey here at the organisation has very much been the NeuroLive kind of timeline. And so that's important because it feels like it also developmentally sort of tracks what we've been doing, which is what Annie's just referencing. Sort of it's useful to look at the two alongside each other. And I'm also thinking I can remember having a conversation with Seke actually just after detective work, sort of saying what an amazing commissioning sort of model for artistic research. That's come up a lot this afternoon. Sue's just mentioned that, Iris has mentioned that. But there are also some things that maybe haven't come up over the last 3 days that I thought maybe I might mention now, because they're just in my mind. Like, there was an amazing workshop that with Dr. Kennel Hill we did with the pupils from Charlotte Sharman's school, with a basis in the NEUROLIVE project. So with some of the bleed that Annie's talking about, one of the things that we really wanted to bring into dialogue with this project was what we were trying to do here at Siobhan Davies Studios, to build on what Sue had done with the open doors, and to really find different ways to sort of connect that into different communities, make different people feel welcome to coming in here. And this project is complex, as we've all heard. You know, it could feel exclusive, it could feel for particular people, and we wanted to find some ways that maybe that would interact and dialogue with some of the other work that we were doing. So that was one of the things that came to my mind, that workshop, which was utterly joyful and just a wonderful experience, particularly poignant now the school is likely about to close, which is very much the backdrop to our work here. So that's one of the things. I was also thinking about, there was a salon at one point. I think there were meant to be more too. And so I can't remember exactly the format that took. It was quite early on. It was sort of discursive, a little bit like this, but a bit more casual with wine. So there were those things that sort of came up, and there's all the brilliant kind of photos and video that has been documented of all the work as well as outputs. But Alban mentioned this yesterday. You keep being quoted, Alban. You've obviously been very sort of insightful. But I had also mentioned it in the chat that we had a couple of weeks ago about the legacy of this project being held within the people. And in the last section, when we were talking about, or you were all talking about what would be lost, and I'm wondering if that actually, maybe it's a form of losing, which is possibly okay, but it's also about how that kind of knowledge and experience is accumulated into each of the people who've been involved in this project, which is kind of hundreds and hundreds. I'm not sure of the exact number. I'm sure somebody knows it. But that kind of accumulation of that very open-hearted collaboration which happened in this project, I think that is the thing for me that will be changing things for each person's practice or experience, or something that they return to later, or maybe something that they actively do now. And that feels very important to me right now when I think about the project. Are you trying to say something?
Yeah, most of what I can.
You have two microphones.
Just on sort of legacy and people, I think I've sort of said it broadly and individually, but I think from the scientific side, to me it's very clear what the legacy is. It's Alban is a PhD student, Henny is a PhD student who just submitted her thesis 2 weeks ago and will have her viva in a few weeks around NEUROLIVE. Laura, postdoc, Sonia, a few other people who aren't here, and the people who are coming in, Anastasia, to do a PhD with me next year, who are all around here now. So there's a, well, we might or might not want to call it a pipeline, but it's, so this is, I think, we had a master student, Jenny, talking earlier, sort of there is a legacy that happens definitely in the people, and I hope that will, I know for a fact it will continue in whatever form you move on, if you ever move on, which I hope you will probably not, or you might, no, you have to, but yeah. Anyway, but sort of those kinds of things are, that, that's ultimately a way of collaborating, way of working together. That's I think an important way of how these sorts of more intangible things live on and will carry through.
I have a few things bubbling, but I think I want to say this one. So in relation to SDS as an organization, being this sort of partner organization, it is called, there's a collaboration agreement. The grant has a collaboration agreement, I think is what its name is, right, with SDS. So there's this like formal relationship with SDS as an arts organization, and that was already built into the application from the beginning. But I think what I want to just say is that from my perspective, NeuroLive as a grant offers a particular space for research, but also doing the artistic research and really, a lot of the scientific research as well in this context also offers a really particular space for research. I think it's really related to what Iris was saying earlier about this like sort of particular space for artistic practice, but I think you can also look at that from a research perspective. And I think there are many important things that are possible here that wouldn't unfold necessarily in the same ways in a university. And I think I mean that also in terms of the sort of administrative structures, and that the administrative structure of an arts organization and this arts organization create a space of possibility for research that is really special. And it's a particularly open space and a particularly textured space, I think, a space that is like sensitized to nuance in a lot of ways, and also, of course, in this space is particularly oriented towards embodiment, for lack of a better term. And so towards, say, moving, like this morning, we can turn up and move together. And like that, I think those kinds of orientations are really important. And also the sensibility about artistic practice, and again, the understanding of artistic practice as an investigative practice. And so just, I feel like that's, from my perspective, it's very important. I guess you could look at it as a particular kind of space for knowledge generation that I think is really important. Yeah. And it is local here, and this is, one project and with certain people involved, which we have tried to make that as broad as possible. We've tried to involve a lot of people in it, but it's still a small and, in a way, niche thing. But I do think that this, to my mind, this space is important as a research space. I don't know if you want to say anything about that, about like what, about the sort of about SDS perspective.
Oh no, I've taken the mic and I don't know what I'm going to say. That's the liveness, isn't it? I don't know, just a few things you were saying about knowledge generation and how much that is knowledge beyond the kind of frontal cortex knowledge, and just how, as a few of us have said, Henny was saying, I love this idea that everything is happening when you're moving, and it's the only way. Like, often I'm in the office, you've got quite a lot of heavy thinking to do, and I'll just start moving because it's the only way that I can actually move my thinking on, is to actually take my brain to use another part of my brain. And I think what we've loved about having the NeuroLive performances here is that it keeps heading towards performance and production, but with the value hugely weighted in the getting there, but not even the getting there, just the now, which is the path, the getting there. And I think we hugely value that. And then Matthias, it's been so brilliant having you further bleed into attending other things here, and we've got you into facilitate a session with Jayu as part of our next choreography, which is our choreographic course that exists outside of formal education that we run here. And it was so great seeing these two generations and worlds meet, and then you then came to the festival. You were like, oh my God, and Ruth, you were there too. It was just quite a mind-blowing building takeover. And Sue, you were there, and it was so great for these young artists to have you there, but also it was really great for you both, that you both fed back and was like, the changing rooms are completely blacked out and turned into a nightclub with gyrating sweaty bodies on the floor. You know, it's like every part of the building was used, and and I think the building's becoming more and more alive as well. I think how you've positively manipulated this roof space with each commission, and in a mirror way, we've been doing our language, power, fear, emotion project, and we've also been just really trying to push the limits of what this roof studio can do, and just feeling so proud of how it's been designed to hold so many different things. And I work here, sometimes it's really stressful, but I often dance in here, and I lie on the floor and I still think, oh God, it's so beautiful to be in here. And that's real testament to the design of the space, because I could really resent being up here sometimes. I mean, sometimes I still go, oh yeah, we need to fix that bit over there, and oh, that bit of painting needs done. But ultimately, the space serves that purpose of opening. And there you go.
As a space, holding a space for research here, I mean, it feels like research is imbued here with what, how Sue and Sarah created this space. And me and Sue were lying on the floor just before you came back in, talking about how beautiful it was. It's nice that you just said that. I also think that our approach to sort of holding the NEUROLIVE process here, which was, quite a significant period of weeks in each of the years, towards the workshops and then towards each of the commissioned works, and of course, most recently, rehearsals for Guido's lecture performance. I think that we've taken an approach of offering to be involved as you need us, but really also giving you the space to do what you need and to keep following the inquiry, whether that is the sort of setting up of the experimental design or the artistic research or the logistics or the producing, but kind of being there to support you when you've needed. And I think that's felt quite important to us. And of course, that kind of flexible way of working has changed year to year. Like when you mentioned earlier, when you were ill with COVID, when it was the snakeskin performance, I stepped in then to try to kind of help hold a gap. And at different points, we've done different things. Like you and Annie have had lots of conversations about different, when you've been selecting artists or about to invite people. So we've been really ready to kind of jump in with both feet, but actually only when you have asked. And I think that's quite an important thing about partnership, because quite often partnership comes with demands, and I think that's quite different in this scenario.
Yeah, the demand felt like it was always for the work or the investigation, and I think we could all get on board with that. It didn't feel like demand of ego, or it was like, well, let the work tell us, I just wanted to reference something you said about the small and the niche, and it made me think a lot about the size of this organisation and how, Sue and I were just joking earlier about moving chairs a lot, and a lot of us, all the team move chairs a lot here, and we're also artistic directors and we're also producers, and, and there is something about the size of us that allows us to get involved, like really involved, and to really know what's going on, and also to back off, but not so far that we can't be called back at any point. And so it just made me think about the size of this, because it was only recently in a recent conversation where we kind of confessed our love for each other and that we might want to continue dating, you know, were there more opportunities, you know, I've lost my breath. So me to make a shit joke and then not be able to recover from it. Thanks, DJ. Yeah. I haven't. What was I saying? Menopause.
You were saying in our recent conversation, we sort of all tentatively said, we really love this. Shall we continue if the chance arises? And we sort of all quite meekly said this, and then we're able to more boldly go into it.
And there was a bit of like, because you could do this anywhere, right? You know, with the money, and the Guido was like, no way.
Because we did, this is what happened, because we had a very typical kind of humble reaction of going, well, of course, if you want to do this somewhere else, that would be very welcome. And, you know, we did a lot of sort of bowing, and then Guido just said, no.
Didn't say it that way. No, I guess maybe that's an opportunity to sort of talk a little bit more boring, but really not boring, sort of organizational stuff, you know, sort of there's so much. I mean, the first year of the project was basically setting things up, and for me it was mostly related to actually signing a contract with the EU, which took 6 months, and buying things through university tendering procedures, which took another 9 months, you know, just to spend. Like, often what happens with grants is that even if you have the money, it's possibly difficult to spend it. And many scientific grants give back money because it's just the sheer sort of paperwork of getting anything through is, and that's a good point to manage Alex Naylor, who is the project coordinator on this project. And every year, as part of the project, pays up to 30 or 40 research assistants. At Goldsmiths, we did that through Goldsmiths, and it took literally 12 months until everyone was paid, you know, for like £300 or something like that, you know. So, and that for me really showcases the stuff that universities can't do. And one thing that universities are particularly we have to remember that we're on camera, that there could be improved upon is sort of how to deal with freelance artists. And it's just, but we're doing this now. I mean, Henny can speak to the latest investigation. We're on camera, but it's just to say, it's, the organizational things is like, and I've written that in reports about the project. The risk was never sort of initially when sort of in the application people think, oh, the risk is, or maybe the collaboration, or, you know, maybe the performances won't happen, maybe artists get sick. All of this is held by you in a way that just never felt like a risk. Maybe it felt to you differently, but generally, to me, it never felt like a risk. I was always confident that things would happen, the artists would get paid, the contracts would be in place, and all of that, you know, so I never worried about that, but I've been in a constant fear and anxiety about whether the equipment would be delivered in time, whether my ethics would come through in time, whether whether I would be able to hire a person in time, you know, so it's like, the risks are always on the administrative side, and they are always at universities. And also, it's not the first project of its kind that has attempted like this, but I think there's something about how the EU funds this work in a way that, you know, you apply, we have a common budget, but the institutions hold it differently. And again, it's a really boring thing, but is really important. So the fact that the Siobhan Davies Studios budget is independent from my university budget means that, you know, I switch jobs from Goldsmiths to UCL, and it doesn't affect anything for the studios, because Goldsmiths and UCL can just have fights about who gets what and whatever, which also took 2 years, you know, but the stuff goes on, you know, and you hold it in the way, so I can trust that performances will happen. Matthias knows that things will happen because there's this sort of, it sits there, you know, sort of like you have your own control, and that gives me security as well, you know. So those are sort of like bigger organizational things that never, you know, that all happen in the background, but which are really important and are really essential to the success of the project. Yeah.
Just on the same subject, I just want to say that I think part of that has to do with a little bit with what you mentioned about sort of size of organization. I mean, that's part of it. And like for me, when I've had really difficult experiences, you know, this is a really recurring issue that you mentioned, Guido, about artists being paid by universities, and so when I've been in that role, also as a PhD student, when there have been research activities that I've been trying to pay other people for, I feel like the sort of size of the organization of the university, the distance between what I'm doing and a person in a bureaucratic role, you know, someone I've never met, someone who's probably like knows nothing about the kind of work that I'm trying to do. I just want to say the word trust, which I think is important. And so one of the things that creates the research environment here is that there is a culture of trust, which is based on something. And there's, you know, a trust in the artist, there's a trust in the artwork, but I have had experiences, like just to contrast that with how it can be otherwise, where the sort of anonymous university apparatus, which of course there is a person at the end of it, but we never meet each other, actually the kind of questions that I'm getting back are, did you really do this? Did this artistic work really happen? I don't trust you. No, literally to that point, like we're not going to give you the money to pay the person who did the work because we have no evidence that the work actually happened. Like, it's not really a question, you know. But like, so those are kind of very fundamental things. But I mean that like the way that you can turn up here and you know that what you're attempting to do is understood. Yeah. So more of that.
I was just thinking about this brilliant thing about the work living on in the bodies, and that collaboration was such a key part of the process, and still is, and that it has touched so many people and paid so many people, and people have paid to come and see it, also being paid to see it, you know, and that, again, I think trust is a really important word here, because I think there has to be some kind of trust that this is transmitting and it is transferring through time, through history and into the future, and that is the legacy building that, you know, you were talking about earlier, Kat, that we all talked about in our previous conversation, and giving value to those moments of chemical reaction that has to happen in live work, you know, and a work, anyone that makes work or performs in live work here, or even in teaching, anything that involves that meeting, it can only be met when it's being met, you know, it only ignites really with the audience's eyes or the participants in the room. It's the only place for it. It's not the thing unless that ignition is in place. And I think I'm thinking about all the data, and I'm thinking about all the writing that is happening and writing up, and I trust that that's not going to just sit somewhere, because the people you're asking to contribute to these things and what you're both doing, I trust, and I'm also advocating for it, that you'll find ways to make that live again and to draw that out. I was saying to Rachel earlier, you know, how was that for you, you know? And it was like, oh my God, when do you ever get to revisit something that you've made, especially in contemporary dance? When do you ever get the space to go, this happened and it was really amazing, and whether it was flawed, whatever failed, it doesn't matter, because that is part of a process, and we're still making work and we make more work, you know. And so I love the idea that all these writings are being written, all this data is being collected by people that really know what the project is for and about, and will continue to find moments of ignition within these otherwise more historically seen as kind of dead, weighted, archival perspectives on archive, you know, which again chimes with our Artist Archive programme, which is about, you know, what about the things that are in danger of being lost or forgotten? What would you fight for? How would you fight for it? And dance often is lost and forgotten, apparently, according to historical kind of like hierarchical systems of value. It is lost and forgotten, but it's not for us. You know, it's not for us because we're doing it and we're passing it on. You know, so it's also a shift in value systems, isn't it? You know, when we think about something being forgotten and lost, it is a shift for us all to do, to go, well, maybe there's a different way of valuing stuff, right?
Very small word. I'm pretty sure the dancers in the room have had this debate within themselves about why our society doesn't accept corporeal information, or information that comes from the body, or the learning that comes from the body. And we will carry on debating that, and we will carry on debating this idea of why do we live in a society where the intellect dictates so much. But in this project, I think there was a combination of both these things working together. And that's really moving, because the dance family is quite often having to resist that, to resist the idea. And in this setup, it was embracing the idea that the brain, that part of us that can be recorded, is present in us and works together. So that felt like I remember I don't think I thought about it right at the beginning because I was so involved in everything else, and there was a moment where I was suddenly incredibly moved by this, because instead of having to resist or re-explain or justify what dance is doing, it was here in the room with the cognitive, with the science, and it was working, and it was making work.
Yeah, we'd love to hear anything that's coming up for you in this. It could be from this moment, it could be from the sort of trajectory of more than this moment. DJ.
Yeah, hello. So hi guys, it's me DJ, if you know me, yeah. I'll just kickstart this, yeah. I haven't been here because I've been so busy, but for what you guys recorded is NEUROLIVE is what its name is. NEUROLIVE. It's like the nature, transformation, living soul, living heart. I'm just listening intrigued from what you guys was saying. We are all NEUROLIVE in different ways, shapes or forms. The molecules will just spread out in many ways and in many distances across the global wide perspective. Yeah. What is NEUROLIVE? NEUROLIVE is all of us. Yeah, and it's a breath of fresh air that it sucks in and you take it out on a big journey. That's what I think. Thank you so much.
Thank you, DJ. Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
I was. There
Thank
we
you,
go.
DJ.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Was that okay?
it was fantastic. Thank you, DJ. And
So welcome indeed.
yeah, again, like you did in the process of How Shall We Begin Again, with your performance and your support for the work and for all of us over many moments when
Thank
we
you.
talk about this. Yeah, thanks for your energy.
You're so welcome.
Yeah, what next? Yeah, I mean, that has been on my mind as we've been speaking, but I feel like some of the things that we've been talking about are slightly sort of forward projecting. Yeah, I don't know, yeah. Yeah, I don't know what next. I don't know that there are, I'm not sure if it's useful to try to, I don't know how concrete it's useful to aim to be in sort of like answering the question, what next? I mean, it would be sort of great to say, like, oh, let's do this next, you know, or maybe there would be multiple possibilities of that could, different people, different groupings might go different directions. But I don't know, I feel like also these sort of, again, like the sort of values that you mentioned, and like there can be like these sort of like aspirations of things to go further, that some of that came up. Efrosini invited that on Monday to some extent, to invited us to think about sort of, yeah, I think she did ask us a bit, what next? Yeah. Good.
So one thing that I'm curious about is to bring the, so I guess a lot of it's continuation, and Scott related to this. So I think a lot of things of what next is continuation and finding ways of continuing, both scientifically and also artistically. So finding opportunities to restage the works that we have done, finding opportunities to continue analyzing the data in multiple different ways. So I think there's a lot of that I think needs thinking about. Really continuation. I'm really hoping that, you know, these works won't be performed only once as part of NeuroLive. I hope that we can find ways of doing it again, also in the interest of replication, you know, with new and better methods then, you know. So those things are quite, so that's one thing that I think is really important. Another thing that I'm curious about is, so what the process, so in this project because it's focused around liveness and around artistic practice in liveness, there was a real focus on learning from the richness of you know, what's already there, you know, sort of there's a focus on experienced artists, and often, you know, the science art context requires, and that relates to interdisciplinary, it requires, and you've talked about that a lot of grounding in sort of, you need to be sure, you've talked about that a lot, you need to be sure as an artist about what you're doing before you start engaging with this, because once the caps are on, you know, sort of it takes over, you know. I think what I'm really interested in this process of what, you know, sort of how do people, so in a way we've worked with people who are already quite, you know, developed in their practice, and I'm curious about that process. How do you get there, and who gets there? And I think that's a sort of interest, sort of in a broader one, that I think I'd like to continue. It's sort of an interest rather than a what next.
I guess also one of the things that we talked about was participation and dance. You know, participating in dancing. And I've been reminded about that quite a lot over the last few days. and thinking about the past work I've done. And something came back to me actually that I had not thought about for years, which was talking years and years ago, maybe about, I don't know, not that, maybe 15 years ago with the dance science team at Trinity Laban about a project which was about heart rate and I guess physiological changes, and but that was more geared about participation. So there's something about, we keep talking about bodily knowing, and there's been lots of conversation yesterday about value and what would performers do if you knew more about what the audience, how the audience were reacting, and would that change? And I feel like there was quite a lot of resistance to that from artists. I felt a really strong resistance in my body when we were talking about that in the room yesterday, because it feels to me like what you've been doing really beautifully is these not entirely parallel lines of inquiry, but sort of overlapping, interconnected inquiry interests. So it seems to me like all of the science team and all of the artists have been able to follow their own interconnected and overlapping lines of inquiry, which feels like a really special thing to do. So we talked about this a lot. It wasn't like one element was serving the other. There was an ability for each person to follow their own interests, and that feels really important to me. And whatever happened next, kind of that kind of equity. Sorry, I've lost my thread a bit, but I did have somewhere I was going, but I can't remember where it was. But that was some of it.
Matthias, I think it was the... Hello? Is this okay? I think you mentioned an interest in consciousness. And so this 5 years is focused on liveness. A lot of the EEG equipment has supported that research, but could you imagine a future where the inquiry different forms of inquiry could take place, but the holding part would remain similar? The equal playing field, the openness to change, the openness to learning, the openness to listening to each other, the kinds of things you were discussing earlier about the unique components of this project, which are also maybe lost and could be paid more attention to, that you could facilitate something where there were opportunities for people to develop other lines of inquiry, but using that same, in a way, method, the same holding method, in the same way of working, the same ways of working together. And then I suppose that you could, that might be one way of thinking about the future. I'm just imagining if you went off and did consciousness someplace else and with somebody else and other people, that is there anything that would remain, would continue, that would sort of sustain the legacy of this project in terms of those ways of working together, less the particular topic of research?
Yeah, absolutely. And something that was kind of coming up for me in the break after our earlier conversation was kind of that I think I would totally see that as a continuation. I see that, I want that to happen, and I would see that as really a sort of natural evolution, also a way that things have happened a lot, a continuity that has occurred a lot in the past through different contexts. And I just have this sense, which is maybe just my own experience, that a lot of the latencies come from experiences of dance and artistic practice more broadly. Like that yes, I'm super prepared to take that into other, places and drawing connections. But I find that I feel like it's definitely not going anywhere. and it also comes from a whole culture of practice, that has loads of history and distribution, different people in different places. There's also something that is maybe a sort of more concrete thing, which I don't really know how to understand yet. So basically this grant was a grant awarded to Guido, and the grant is structured as a grant to an individual. It's designed that way. A consolidated grant for an individual to consolidate their research. But what Guido proposed was something that is collaborative. And so my presence is written into the grant along with other co-investigators as one of the co-investigators. So it's slightly sort of unconventional. But now, since the time of the grant beginning, I've done a PhD. And so I feel like there's a possible way for me to start trying to understand how I could potentially, I think, apply for grants myself. I don't have an affiliation, I don't have a sort of a place, but I feel like there's a possible other angle of approach to take, which is something I need to kind of be understanding more. But just to say, there's this sort of positionality that now has sort of more potential forms than it did at the beginning. And of course, there are lots of other artists doing PhDs. So I wonder what that means. And that partly has to do with who the grant is, who the application is made to. So there was also something specific about NEUROLIVE, which I'm not sure that we said over these days, where Guido, as a cognitive scientist, made the application for NEUROLIVE to a social sciences and humanities panel.
Yes, arts and humanities, not even social sciences.
Arts and humanities. So you choose where you're directing your application to in a number of categories, and it wasn't directed to the science panel or neuroscience panel. It was directed instead as something sort of cross-disciplinary, interdisciplinary, to a different sort of granting audience. So to this arts and humanities panel, how would you go for supporting this? And then Guido did his pitch, which they obviously liked. But so there's something about who is pitching to whom with what as a proposal. So there's a need to think about that in practical terms. And there seem to be quite a range of options which you need to kind of learn about and understand something of the landscape of, which is sort of not obvious. It's quite different from the sort of landscape of there being a single, if you think of it as being a single Arts Council England, and if you're an artist and you're applying for money, there's one direction of application. It's, I think, much broader and sort of more specified than that. Of course, there are also other places that artists can apply. But yeah, so I'm trying to sort of process these things, and it's a new learning, I think. But I would certainly, through my experience of NEUROLIVE and also my experience of my PhD, I would always say that I think it's so important to have a partnership with an arts organization, and that I think it's really crucial.
I'm curious about the project that you sort of slipped in under with Jayu, the sort of little smuggled in project. I like that. Someone used that word. Which you, Matthias, you said it wasn't an artwork, and I was kind of curious about that as well because I saw it completely as an artwork. But and that, the potentiality for those kind of, like within this big 5-year project, or it's going to go on for much longer, you were able to sort of smuggle a small testing or an experiment that was really a sort of, in a way, it was the most sort of artistic, scientific experiment of anything. It was quite singular. It was just one idea that just got brought about. I'm sort of quite interested in that construct that's just a coming together quite equally, and whether you know of opportunities for that kind of thing to occur in a much smaller scale than something as huge as NEUROLIVE, which would be, for most artists, feel like way too ambitious. But yeah, I'm kind of curious where that sort of thing could lie, and whether a sort of some sort of program where those sort of things could emerge or come about, the conditions for those sort of things could come about between scientists and artists could happen.
Yeah, I mean, I hear that as a kind of an invitation and a sort of almost like a dreaming, like where could these spaces be? I think I don't know, it makes me think about how I think it takes somebody being open to it, somebody caring about it. And also it makes me want to say that I feel like there are related things to like when you're saying where else might these things already be happening. I remember Iris, you were involved in another collaboration with a neuroscientist and another choreographer, which was in another context, and sort of didn't have the sort of broader project context around it that NEUROLIVE did, and I don't know the details about that, but of course this is not the only thing of this type. And then also just to say, my own thinking about the work that we did together with Jayu was that it was important about the sort of aims that it began with, and also that it was different in terms of things like how much time the process had. So we weren't going into like maybe was it like a 3-week process or something? That we weren't going into a 3-week process going, in 3 weeks we need an artwork. We were going into a process saying, in 3 weeks we're going to structure some kind of experiment around this subject area. And so in a way it's like, phew, like we could set our aim at a certain point. And also I think then what we did was, like I think as Jayu said, that you went quite far into making it an artwork. But then sometimes I've heard you say in the past like weeks, like it isn't. It could go further as an artwork. So it depends how you think about that.
And I just wonder whether, artists, we are just so modest and we're just so scared of saying, yes, this is an artwork, or I'm aiming for to make an artwork, and we don't even know what's the definition of an artwork here. We're just kind of practicing, and we often use the word practice. We are practicing, and we're practicing art. We're not kind of making anything that is so grand, and so oftentimes I feel like I'm making work, and after the work has been premiered and it's art, it's always work in progress. It's never like, this is it. And I hope for the next iterations where I can kind of make some improvement. Like life is all about improving, and artwork is all about improving. So I think we did not go into this making a commissioned performance work. The setup is very much an experimental lab situation. So that kind of gives us a kind of playful space rather than this pressure of producing something that is so definite and you have to do it over and over again and you can repeat. And in terms of thinking about it as an artwork was pretty much in my mind, and after we'd done this I thought, how can I turn this into an artwork, as if that was not hard enough already. And then, so I just didn't have this kind of courage to say, yes, what we have done constitute as a art endeavor, whatever we put on. It's just a research. And so
I've
then
always thought of it as an artwork.
you always thought that was an artwork. I think that's really nice. But I thought the whole thing in itself, if we can repeat, like kind of, if it's repeatable, the whole thing, even in its kind of very shaky and experimental side, in itself, can be seen as a kind of artwork, because every iteration is different, and on that point, I think it could be. But we did not go in there because I was just so scared of thinking about it. This is an artwork. It's just too much to contemplate that.
I think whatever it takes to make the artwork, you don't have to call it an artwork, And if it, whatever, because it's about context and how you feel held, right? And then it's, and it's language, And I think if we can get more creative with that to enable us to make more, great. But it doesn't matter whether it's whatever it is, right? Urinal artwork, all that jazz. But yeah, I think there's something so, a lot of dancers are incredibly eloquent, articulate, brilliant with words, excellent writers, and yet it's not necessarily falling into the ways that we need to write in order to get lots of money, and it's a constant tension. But we have ChatGPT now, right? So it's all fine, yeah? But it's really interesting tension, isn't it? Like the spaces we occupy, which is not that we don't use our frontal cortex, but we combine it with all these other incredible areas of the brain, but it doesn't. And why is ChatGPT so popular? We need an app, we need software to enable us to fit into a framework that a small amount of people have designed for us to, that's the only way we can do it, because, whether it becomes an access tool or what, we need something that helps us to fit into an architecture that we haven't been part of designing,
I feel like I want to say something to Henny just about where could it go and where could it come from and what would be other opportunities to do something like that. I think the first thing is that I haven't come across a grant call for any sort of funding since I work in the UK that doesn't want interdisciplinary research. It's literally in every call. So it's like everybody wants interdisciplinary research. Everybody wants cross-disciplinary research. All the research councils say like, oh, just apply 50% to us, 20% to us. We all wanted to sort of mix it. So on the surface, there is this sort of you get these constant invitation for like this kind of work that we are doing. So it seems like everybody is wanting this, And then in reality, what happens is, where I think it then falls short, is the people who make decisions, the gatekeepers. They are themselves not interdisciplinary, and they get these applications, and they look at that from their discipline, and they see the interdisciplinary value, but they can only see what's missing, because in reality, if I make an interdisciplinary research program that is neuroscience and part art, then a significant amount of money will go to the artistic research, which is not then available to the scientific research, which limits the number of people I can hire, and all of that, So then they only look at that, what's missing, or the sort of lack of control conditions and all of that. So that is hard that's nothing you can do about. But I guess what I'm saying, the solution, or one of the solutions is, in practice, is to, from an artistic perspective, so I know how I'm going to encounter that from the scientific one, and sometimes I'm successful, most of the time probably not, but from the artistic side it is exactly sort of that sort of thing. So I think thinking about what an artwork is, and sort of in the context of what could it be in that sort of relationship or in that sort of working with that discipline, sort of like for performing and not performing, we shape it in a certain way that meets the needs of a psychological experiment. So what would that mean in other contexts? Beyond the idea of like public engagement and sort of doing that, that's always an option, but like, and the other thing is, I think it's also just applying, so it's like this process of like writing grants and sort of it's a very unique and sort of strange process in itself, which you can't really, and arts council grants are very different from other sorts of grants, so it's often also a practice, it's a writing practice, and if you, whether applying for different grants means finding a specific partners and pitching it in certain ways, so I think that's the sort of thing I think that would be interesting to look at. And on the same side, you would hope that the people who sit on these research councils will, through encountering NeuroLive or other works, get a different idea about what can be done and what things can look like.
In relation to that, it makes me think that there's a sort of tension with the interdisciplinary, cross-discipline framework, in that it sort of has a kind of transgressive potential, disruptive. It's like sort of mixing things that don't go together traditionally, or kind of challenging assumptions about things. And then it's also got a kind of conservative impulse that's like, you see, like, scientists are creative, or artists do know what they're doing, or this does make sense, or that's kind of about kind of consolidation and holding on to something. So I think these two things going together is exciting and tricky, like you're saying, because there's the thing of it. It's sort of by doing a science experiment in here during a performance, there's something very transgressive about that. So it is kind of, or kind of questioning, is this even an artwork? That's a sort of very disruptive thing. But we're also always in a position of wanting to kind of consolidate and get the money or get the security, even if it's just sort of psychological security of like, I do know what I'm doing. Not sure where I'm going with that, but it just made me think of that.
Seki, thank you. You just sparked a quick idea. This is very short. And this last conversation suddenly shifted towards funding, which is, but not really funding. It's really a question of definitions and what is understood by working together, coming from different perspectives. But you have a lot of knowledge you've built up in this group. Obviously, we talked about what was being lost, but I just wonder whether or not, you're sitting here, some of us have just joined, this is more of a public symposium, but could you envision meeting together in a few months' time, take the summer break, and gathering, she's working with us at CDARE, so you've got an insight into some of those mechanics of working. Also with Juliet at Tavistock, so that's a collaborative doctoral award. You've got some sense, some feeling for this space a bit, this research space. You've done a PhD. Maybe those of you who've been in the project, really embedded, could meet and have this kind of conversation for like half a day. Really, really brainstorming. Maybe invite some people from not funding bodies necessarily, but people who know a little bit more about some of this landscape to see if you could tease out, even working on a bid together, like as an exercise, just to tease out what some of this space is, what some of the questions are. This isn't the moment, and also with Kat and Annie, who've given you the space, that might be interesting to kind of tease out what that funding landscape might look like with some concrete information. The UKR is shifting borders a bit. There is more space, but less money, so we have those kinds of issues anyway. But it just struck me there might be like a half-day brainstorming exercise around this particular issue that you could do together, given how much you collectively know. That's just a thought.
That's a very important thought. Thank you. I would really like to do that, and I'm up for organizing that. And I really like that you've pointed towards like after the summer break. That's really good. And so I guess there's a kind of keeping in touch somehow. But definitely I'm very happy to say that I'm gonna try and make that happen, and I'm happy to be contacted by people who would like to join that. And we'll figure out the practicalities of it. Thanks, that's really concrete. And just it relates for me to, like in terms of, one of the ways I would see the aims of that is to continue to help each other to, I think it takes a bit of courage to imagine sort of towards these kinds of things. They're like a little bit of a stretch. And also, there's not that many examples of things like this having happened before. Also, I think it's very intimidating to try to think about putting together an application like this. It takes a huge amount of capacity. How actually are you going to do that? But so I think this sort of like continuing a culture of support and just like the sort of fostering the courage in one another, I think is actually really important. And I think it might be time for us to say thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry? No. No, please don't. I feel like we're going to sing a song now. That'd be good.
I haven't written this myself. Matthias gave this to me.
Okay. Yeah.
But I have had input.
Yes. Yeah, so so today it marks the final public event of this particular project, and this being involved in this project for me, I think for all of us, is a huge privilege, and like having a grant such as this is an immense privilege, particularly in the sort of funding climates that we've talked about, and so many levels, in so many ways. I am very grateful for this, and of course, Guido, it has happened thanks to you. So thank you for doing that. I also remember during the writing of the grant application that I was busy doing other projects, and that you had to sort of like grab some time for me to sort of like say, can we actually like put this detail in, actually complete the application. It was difficult to do that at the time, but had we not done that, then that would have been such a huge missed opportunity. I think that what I feel is possible to do now is a kind of really short form thanks for this like very long form project. And I think of this, perhaps this can be a thanks from me and Guido, but also I feel like I know that I feel like these thanks are also really felt by everyone who's been involved in the project and the different members of the team with each other. So I want to thank everybody who's contributed to this final series of the public events and who's come to these workshop days and these symposium days, and also the lecture performance last night. And then also, for the 5 years, I can only in the very briefest way thank all of the artists who've been involved, all of the people who've been the commissioned artists on the lead works, and all the collaborating performers and the wider artistic teams around all of those, and also the artists who have contributed specifically to the workshops that we've had each year. And then, yeah, also there's a thank you to all of you who have been audiences and participants in the activities that have been part of this project. It's now your verse of the song.
Right, so, yeah, I mean, I'll start with saying thank you to the co-investigators of the project, all the co-investigators who wrote the project together with me, and again, I'm not going to say it. There's the other name, I'm also not going to name specific. I also just want to thank myself, all the artists who have worked with us. I think I'm just going to repeat what you've written and just I just reframe it. So all the artists and all the artistic collaborators, and I also want to thank the scientific team, all of them, and I mean the people who are part of the core team. I'm not going to say there's too many, but also a brief thank you to all the people who came in for various periods of time from Brazil, from everywhere. Like we've had people who just came for 2 weeks, or like, I'm just going to say Enrique, it comes to mind, just came twice from Brazil to do EEG gelling, which is bizarre, but great. Or Camilla. I've said 2 names, but they said that I'm not saying your names now. Emma. So it's like I'm going to say a few names that I normally don't always say. Emma, who sort of did a follow-up study in Frankfurt with a video of detective work, or by herself with a phone call every now and then. Audiences, we said. I want to thank to the European Research Council, and I think I'm really happy, and every time it happens in every talk, I always make sure the European flag is on there, and sort of my subversive sort of things against Brexit and all of it. And I'm really happy that the scientific team and also the team is very European in its setup. So it's very broad. It's Spanish, Irish, Italian, Greek. I think that means a lot to me. So saying, and for this format of which we talked about, I feel the European Research Council is one of the last places. And I love their mission. I'm just going to sing a song about the European Union, which sort of, their sort of mission statement is the only decision criterion for the work that we fund is scientific excellence. And they don't, you could say that, what does that mean? And they don't define it anywhere, which I think is great. So they don't give impacts or targets, or you need to do this or that. You just need to we just essentially just submit a good idea and show us that you can do it, and we'll fund it, which I really like. That doesn't happen much in the UK. Again, I'm being filmed. This is leading to lots of editing, so I've got to work. I want to thank the partners. So, first and foremost, Siobhan Davies Studios for holding this place. There's the Max Planck Institute for Empirical Aesthetics in Frankfurt, who funded an entire postdoc as part of the project, just to be part of that, and some of the research has happened there. Goldsmiths, who hosted the first 2 or 3 years and were instrumental also for me in the vibe of the project. I've always thought of it very much as a Goldsmiths project. And UCL, who are holding the project now. To continue, before we do, I also want to say thank you to Alex, who isn't here with us because he's away. Alex Neidet, who had for many years a double role and was sort of here. What was his role at SDS again? General manager. So general manager, who sort of at the beginning of the project we were slightly concerned because there's a walking conflict of interest, but it turned out to be really great because he's very seamlessly for many years and solved a lot of problems in the setup and the initial things, and was really getting continues to do so. So I want to say thank you to Alex and to Iris, obviously, who has held the production side. And Matthias is going to say something, but I also want to say, continuing the dating analogy that Annie introduced, so I think my relationship with Matthias is now sort of more closer to a marriage at this point. So I just want to say, like, I'm ready to renew my vows. Yeah.
You heard it here first.
Thanks. But we can talk about this later. I just I'm going to continue doing some work on the writing on the NEUROLIVE project, but because our public events are coming to a close, it means that in a sort of technical way, Iris's role as producer of the artistic events sort of in some senses comes to a close, which is very difficult to imagine. And I just want to say thank you so much to yeah. Yeah. I can get some words out to Iris. Sorry, I promised myself I wasn't going to do that. I've been watching too much reality TV. But yeah, just obviously your role in the project has been so core. But I mean, you're really part of the leadership of it, and your contribution happens on so many levels of the project. On every level, and that's obviously I'm saying this particularly to Iris because we've worked so closely together, but also I really mean that to absolutely everybody, all the wonderful people in the team. And yeah, thank you so much, everyone. And we are going to the pub, and we would like to invite you to join us. If you'd like to, we're going to the Albert Arms, which is just down the road there, and we hope that you will stay in touch with us. And thank you, Sue. Thank you, Kat and Annie. Thank you all.